welcome back. I hope everyone is having just a fabulous Navigate. I know I certainly am. We're here to kick off the back half of the afternoon with a couple fabulous panels. So we're gonna just go ahead and get started. I want to start with some things that we learned from a recent survey of security professionals. A couple of interesting things were revealed. The first theme is sadly one that's recurring and probably something that is pretty familiar to all of you. And that is that security professionals are still struggling to adequately communicate in a way that resonates with the business the value of identity and the importance of identity. And as a direct result, they are coming up against constrained budgets and limited executive sponsorship. The second theme is concerning, but undoubtedly linked to the first, and that is that nearly half of the companies that we surveyed are in the very, very early stages from a maturity standpoint of their identity governance project. And then I'll take it a step further. Of the most mature companies that we surveyed, they have less than 70% of their identities covered by just foundational governance capabilities. So you add these two things together, and organizations are starting to get a little nervous, getting desperate. In order to stay relevant, in order to meet constrained budgets, in order to get sponsorship and show progress, they are making what I think is a critical mistake. They are taking this very complex problem and trying to simplify it. They're trying to narrow it down to a very small subset of capabilities. And in this industry, we know that's dangerous. And let's be honest, when you do this, a breach or exposure is probable in your future. However, there's some good news here. Also, we learned in the study that with the right approach, we know that companies can very, very quickly advance the maturity of their program. And we've seen this. We've seen some very large, complex organizations implement and rapidly mature their program. And their playbooks actually apply to everybody. It's not just the large enterprises, it's any size company in any vertical. So on that note, I am thrilled to be joined today on stage by leaders from some of today's most well-recognized and valued brands. And they're gonna share a little bit about their story and how they got here and tell us all the secrets to how you do this right. So please join me in welcoming Greg Handrick from Best Buy, Gary Remy from Cognizant, and Larry Klein from ExxonMobil. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining me here today. I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm very excited to learn more about your security journey and here are the tips and tricks. I think, for all of us, we could spend hours talking about this, but according to the prompter, we've got 42 minutes and 17 seconds, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. So I wanna go back to that, that challenge and what I think is a critical mistake, and this is when organizations are, they're flailing a little bit and they're trying to look for a simple alternative to this complex problem. I'm not talking about a simple solution, but kind of narrowing down the problem. Look, we know this is risky, and while appealing, the promise of simplicity just doesn't exist. So you are all security experts for some very large brands, and I would love to know from you how you secured the right priority and how you got the right stakeholders to be involved internally. So Greg, I'll start with you and move to Gary.
Well, thank you, Meredith. And I'm going to start out by being a little contrary and saying, actually, I advocate simplicity.
Yep.
So we're actually trying to simplify our identity application portfolio to avoid the house of cards effect of having too many things trying to all do the same things. But for us, we started off, speaking to the involvement question, we started off with basically just information security and IT operations, and those were our stakeholders. And if you kind of picture the statue of justice with the two-balance scale, we found that we didn't have enough stakeholders in the mix. So we probably have a 5-balance scale because we ended up bringing in representatives from compliance, from HR, and then from the employees for the employee experience. And we found that if any one stakeholder gets too much effort, the whole thing gets out of balance. So because of that, we try to bring everybody to the table. We actually have a steering committee where we bring those stakeholders together on just an easy 6-week cadence for an hour. And we all get to talk about our problems, challenges, current goals. And then that's where we get prioritization.
Great. Great.
Yeah, Greg, I totally agree with you on the simplification and standardization piece. I think simplification might be a little bit different in the definition that we're giving to it, but I hear what you're saying on that. But for us, there's no two orgs alike, so every stakeholder that we talk to within Cognizant, we're always looking at exactly what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to go after, and helping drive the identity vision with them using simplification and standardization. It does anchor us back to the why and the outcomes ultimately that we're trying to achieve with them. We have a couple of different vehicles that we're using. We've started to try to take this high touch, high engagement type of approach with everything that we do. So we have our own IAM roadshow that goes out to a bunch of different senior level leadership groups across the firm. We have a technical working group that gets a little bit more hands-on in the weeds. And then we also use some of our existing engagement channels with our strategic risk committee and within our executive oversight committee. So there's an awful lot to getting engaged like that. There's a lot of heavy lifting that has to go on to get prepared for those things. But the outcomes at the end of that ultimately end up helping us with high visibility, high engagement, and it helps us drive better timing, better outcomes. One last thing that I'll add to that is that it also has had an unintended effect of helping us drive down task switching, as well as the amount of involvement that we have to spend on just managing demand control. So all of the demand coming from those individual stakeholders, when it's just send it in to us, is a whole different story when we're taking it out to them and having them be a seat at the table with us. So that's our journey that ends up being a little bit more collaborative and a little more unified in terms of our approach.
I really like that, and I think that's a good point, right? We know this is a very complex problem, but to garner that consensus with your stakeholders, you have to present what is a simple approach, right? You have to get them on board, because we know this is a journey. It is never ending. So the next question, and Larry, I'll start with you, and then would love for Greg to weigh in. You guys have cracked the code, so to speak, in that you've implemented a very strong and ongoing identity security program, and you've done so pretty quickly. And from my purview, it seemed like it was easy. You may completely disagree, but it felt like it was very fast, very smooth from my perspective. So I'd love for you to educate us. If you were to capture the list of the top 3, these are the things you have to do, and then I guess I'd say the bottom 3 pitfalls. What would that list look like? So Larry?
Yeah, the first thing is process simplification and harmonization. So it's not just taking great technology and implementing it. We've got to redo our complex processes. That is causing us so much support nightmares and headaches. It's costing us additional just cost and people time, and as well as we can get a lot of standardization from that. And so for us, our program has been given the authority to challenge any process. And we can't challenge every process, because then we'll never get anything done. But we've challenged a lot, and we've been able to stop several. We've actually changed a lot. But the ones we're having the most challenges with are the risk ones, the risk discussions. We do have a direct line to the right decision makers, so we do bring those up. And in some cases, the risk is too great. We don't change. But a lot of times, we have those discussions and end up changing.
So actually, Larry and I were comparing notes, and we developed our lists separately, and we wanted to see if we had any overlap, and they're completely different. And we actually decided in talking about it that if you asked us to do this thing again next month, we'd probably come up with 6 different essentials as well. Okay. So for today, my top 3 essentials are: number 1, understand your environment. You got to know the tech, you got to know the stakeholders, you have to know the business objectives, and that it's going to continue to evolve, so you got to stay on top of that. Tailor your message for your audience. So the way I talk about identity here is not the way I talk about it with our CFO or with somebody from marketing or anybody who's a consumer of these systems. And then my third top essential would be, no matter what your program is, no matter who your stakeholders are, always, always deliver on the basics. Nobody wants to talk strategy with you if you can't create an account accurately and timely every time.
That's great.
So another essential for us is change management. All right, so we're on a multi-year journey to replace over 20 different in-house built custom apps, and we're redesigning over 50 processes. So that's going to take time, and we definitely need to do our stakeholder analysis, our impact assessments, and come up with the various communications. But we also need to make sure we have empathy for those business units, right, that are going to be negatively impacted when their custom solutions are going to go away. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we do have enterprise-wide recognition that that is the right direction. And so that whole plan, and it's going to evolve as, at least for us, we're having multiple rollouts, multiple changes. We have to keep on that change management plan. And then the last thing for us is a people strategy, right? So for us on the implementation, how are we going to staff it? Are we going to use internal employees? Are we going to use vendors, external vendors, external partners? If we use employees, what training do they need? The partners, what do they need to know? What do they need to know about our culture or about our processes? So it's going to be key to have all that laid out ahead of time, as well as a people development strategy. So again, our program is years long. We don't expect everyone in our organization to stay during the project. So how do we move people in and out that accommodates their careers but doesn't impact the transformation?
Great. All right, well, thank you guys. And that's a really good lead into the next question. You mentioned know your stakeholder. I think that's just key. So something that I've observed with the three of you and really all of our most successful customers is the amount of work that you put in on the front end, even before the solution was selected. There was just a tremendous amount of work put in to establish really just this ironclad security posture and program that matches the needs of your business, the pace, and kind of the tone. It really resonates with the stakeholders. And I think you're positioned as truly a business enabler. So talk to me about how you've seen your program really enable the business. Gary?
Yeah, we're definitely getting some good feedback. We're continuously engaged with our C-suite and various working channels, like I was mentioning before, as well as our board. But we're definitely getting good feedback and good support through those engagement channels. One of the things for us, it actually helps us solve the reactive nature of IAM, the more visibility and high touch that we get from all of those different stakeholders. It lets us shift from a tool-centric approach, which is what we have had for years and years and years, to a more outcomes-based approach. So we're talking less about tools and the technologies and the how to do it, and more about why we're doing it and what the purpose is and what we're shooting for. Some interesting things are starting to happen as we gain that level of visibility, though. Our BISO organization, our Business Information Security Officer organization, as well as our product development teams, are starting to reach back inside to the internal IAM team, which is where we live, and they're coming to us for subject matter expertise. They're actually asking us to get involved with the client engagements on a whole host of different topics. Everything from development practice all the way through just client audit and client audit activities and how do we handle certain situations. So I like to believe that it's because we're developing a really strong and mature program, and so I think that level of visibility is gaining that sort of that being known in the environment, and so now that's starting to push those teams back to us. Last thing I'll say about this is that we actually, well, before I jump there, it puts us in this sort of cliche term of customer zero. So we're actually putting ourselves in that situation of, okay, we did it inside, now we can go show our clients and customers that we're actually doing it everywhere else. Last thing I'll say is we use our own client delivery organization for staff augmentation effectively, but we have those as a regular part of our operation. I was just talking to some other folks from SailPoint the other day, some of your colleagues, Meredith, and we were starting to sort of bounce the ideas of the potential of using that organization and using us as a test bed or a training bed for those folks to get their skills, get their skill set up to where it needs to be, so that by the time we send them out into the wild to the customer and client sites, they're much more successful with everything that we have put on their plate. And it ultimately does better for Cognizant at the end of the day.
Great.
So the main thing that really resonates with our senior leadership is central administration. So this concept of one team handling all the practices and policies certified by risk management, instead of every team trying to figure it out, or worse, not even doing it. Another area that helps enables our business as well is that we can't do today is really looking about auto-assigned access. So auto-assigned access and easily being able to set that up and set that policy up. We feel that that's one of our biggest benefits. Just as an example, we have one technology that has 2,000 requests a day. And most of that's provisioned, but someone still has to request and approve that. And if we can get away from that model and move to more automated assignment of access, then that will give that time back to the business. And we've done it in small pockets already, so we know it works.
Okay, great. All right, well, I have one last question. I'm going to pose it to all three of you. So, we've talked a lot about complexity. This is a complex problem. The technology component is also fairly complex. It requires, a comprehensive tool, expertise to understand how to use it, expertise in the industry. You have to have expertise to understand now how does this tie into your organization's key business drivers. And so, this goes back to a little bit of, understanding your stakeholder, but when you're having conversations with your key stakeholders, how do you overcome kind of that knowledge gap with people that might not have that same level of expertise? So, Greg, I'll start with you.
Okay. I'll actually kind of flip that around and say, if I'm talking to the CFO, is he going to expect me to be as expert in finance as he is? I hope not, because I'm not. Or a doctor. I should not be the expert in his medical specialty. He is. I happen to be the subject matter expert in the IDAM space. So I just think it goes with the territory that not everybody that we talk to is going to understand our business the way we do. So Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that's one that applies here. It's valuable to take time talking to stakeholders, number one, to figure out where they're at, to understand their goals, their challenges, their business drivers, and their pains, so that it can inform what we do first. So it just goes back to that essential of understanding your audience, knowing where they're coming from, and when you understand that, the roadmap ahead of you from an identity perspective actually is easier, because now it's clear. We know what things we're solving, and we know who's along for the ride. So.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'll kind of go back and just lean on some of the things that I already mentioned. Is we have all these different engagement channels, and we're constantly communicating to different stakeholders in a myriad of different ways, whether it be the value that it's bringing to them, or it be the security value that we're driving. In some cases, it's a mandate that we've got to put some level of control in place. In either case, the audience on the other side, on the receiving end of that, has, like you said, they have an understanding about what this space is about and why we're doing what we're doing. So we have to really, again, focus on the simplification, the standardization, and drive the message according to what that audience can ingest or can understand. And it's not simple. I mean, there's a lot of folks on the team that speak only a very technical level of language, and so we've got to get the right people in front of them as well. So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act and a bit of a trick to get that done.
Larry?
I think they covered it for what I was.
Perfect. Perfect. Good. Well, listen, thank you guys so much. This has been incredibly valuable. I certainly have learned a lot. I hope you have too. As I say at the end of all of these, we're a community. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't leverage the collective expertise. So please take advantage of this conference to keep the conversation going. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Kelly and Raj, for joining me on stage as well. We're going to have a fireside chat, and we had this whole joke prepared about there being no fire, but Matt already did it, so thank you, Matt. You guys can laugh, That was the icebreaker here. But we're here to talk about zero trust. As we all know, it's a term that's widely used. I'm sure most of the organizations represented here are on a zero trust journey. We see it every day. As Deloitte, most of our clients are on that path as well, some ahead of others. There is a lot of buzz around it and hype, and some say, there is some debate on what it exactly is. It's a pretty broad term. So here to unpack it a little bit through this conversation, Kelly and Raj, thank you for joining me again. We had 15 minutes. I think we still have 15 minutes, so we'll get right into it. And let me start with you then, Kelly.
Okay.
You've been part of this journey with different organizations. You've seen it from different perspectives. Help us understand, what is zero trust to you? What should an organization think when they're thinking zero trust?
That is an amazing question. I would first say, assume breach. Trust no one, verify often. Mm-hmm. There are many things that make up the framework. Right. To follow the journey and work through the framework, follow a risk-based approach. So the decisions need to be from a risk decision perspective. And the main part should be identity. You should start with identity, but there's network, there's application, there's data, there's all kinds of things that make up the framework and help you on your journey. But I would say at the core of that is identity.
All right. And it's that mentality of assume breach, right?
Correct.
Trust no one, you're starting verifying, there are no standing privileges.
Correct.
That's kind of what's making it up. So Raj, we're here at Navigate, everybody here is in some way associated with the identity side of things, right? There are other aspects, but if you can help us understand, like from an identity perspective, right? What are some of what is the role of identity in that Zero Trust framework? If you can make it more real for the audience there.
So identity is the front and center for any Zero Trust implementation. And I'm talking without any bias, even though I've just been practicing IAM for the past 20 years, right? The reason being is it establishes a foundation that enables you to be dynamic, right? In terms of how you evaluate the connection information from a context perspective and then access against the risk-based policies and whatnot. So it's about how do you enable being static, role-based, entitlement-based access to a more dynamic runtime access decisions that encompasses of the whole of the context, not just the user as well. So identity plays a major role. Not only that, I know Kelly talked about the various domains within Zero Trust, which is data, you talk about applications and whatnot. Identity basically integrates each one of these layers. And as you can see, more and more domains are actually identity-centric. If you talk about network, you talk about software-defined perimeters and whatnot, they are more identity-centric in such a way that there is not segmentation. There is nothing called as network perimeter, right? It's all identity perimeter. So I almost would say identity is a new perimeter.
Right. It's really, if you're assuming the breach, as you said, starting with identity, you really have to understand who the person is to start to give that entitlement or access or allow them in or outside the network. So in that context, diving a little bit deeper, right? IGA has a role to play, identity, just the quality of identity or identity hygiene. What are some of the specific considerations or aspects of identity you think that are relevant here?
So if I want to break it down at the very basic foundational level, it's a subject trying to access the object. Object being an application, a resource, a system of organizations or whatnot be, right? So from a subject context, identity is always looked at as a user perspective. What does a user have from an entitlement or role? The user attributes. It needs to be expanded beyond user and have to encompass of device attributes. What is the channel through which the user is getting onto the system, right? Device, whether it is managed or unmanaged. If it is unmanaged, what is the security, what posture for a particular device in terms of versions and whatnot. And the third important factor is what are the various external environmental factors such as time of the day, geolocations, and whatnot. So if you're considering identity, it's a context-based identity. The subject is consisting of user, devices, and resources. So that's the first consideration. How do you expand your user context to device and environmental context? That's number one. Number two is how do you actually centralize the access decisions? While I have the context, and I can basically orchestrate my policy-based access control to give the resources, the users to the access to the right resources. For me to make the decision making, I need a lot of data. Not just the data about users' devices or whatnot, but also the organizational risk posture. So the integration of the centralized identity engine with respect to SOC or SIEM is key in terms of enabling that particular portfolio. For example, Raj can log into this particular device, at this particular time. All those are good. But if there's a breach which has happened on that particular organization, I should be able to restrict Raj's access as well. I should be able to isolate the breached system. So for me to do that, the centralized access decision engine is so key in enabling that. And the last and the final thing, in my opinion, is for me to have the subject and as well as the centralized access decision to work, it's the data, underlying data, what we call as identity hygiene. We've been talking about it for long, right? And IGA plays a major role in it. Right. I know. I think you've talked a lot about IGA and the identity hygiene in the past. So
Yeah, we've both seen our fair share of organizations that don't have clean data, and if you don't have clean data, it's not coming from the right places. There's a whole lot that can go wrong and mess you up along the way.
And that's where tools like SailPoint play a key role as well, right, in helping organizations establish that identity hygiene. And I think this morning we heard about DAS as the tool as well and data structure. So taking the zero trust concept a little bit forward as well, right, beyond identity, I think with this capability, they're starting to help in other areas of zero trust as well. When you establish context on the data, you realize who has access to that and the risk profile of that data structure. It's helping you further your zero trust journey in certain ways, being able to make more intelligent decisions on the data side as well. So it's expanding identity and going into that data side. So I think that's a great innovation or
especially just to add on it. So how can you make sure that the human reliance is less on the data which is being attested, right? Whether you're talking about predictive identity, you're talking about risk-based AI-based processes that enables you to make some decisions based on. As an example, and in attestation, if you're talking about, hey, whether Raj has access to A and B, instead of that, it's not just whether he has access to A and B, but it also means that what is the time he has logged in? When was the last log on, as an example, right? That gives you additional insights for the approver or the reviewer to make some cognizant decision on what it is. So it's about the pristinity of how well you would be able to abstract the human intelligence or other human nature of approving everything, and then just involving AI and ML to enhance the data, even for attestation.
That's right. I mean, we've spoken about kind of the construct and what role identity plays in that, but I think as we have helped, and I'm sure, Kelly, you've seen that as well, there are some challenges on that zero trust journey as well, right?
Absolutely.
What are some of the common challenges, and what's your advice to organizations on that journey to be able to address some of those challenges?
I think one of the ones that we've seen quite a bit has been lack of or insufficient data, or just not having the right data from the CMDB. So if you don't know what you have in totality to secure, it's real hard to go start that journey. Having an incomplete CMDB without all of the information needed, very, very difficult.
Yeah, you got to know what you're protecting.
Right.
Otherwise, what are you going to do about it? Yeah?
Exactly. And one more to just add on to that list is, it's about whenever I have a conversation about zero trust, the first question is, hey, what should the technology that should enable it? Where is the on and off switch for that?
And there's not
Unfortunately, exactly. It's a journey, right? And so it's a framework, it's a set of design principles which you have to hone in on. So it's not just a specific technology, it's a combination of process and technology, and then upliftment of what you need to do based on your strategy when it comes to zero trust.
Right.
So I have a question. If I'm going to get budget to start a zero trust journey, where would I start? What would be the one thing that you would say, go do X?
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't start with just one, but I would say a couple of them. One is, to your previous point, we need to know what to protect, right? That's very important, right? Having a great perimeter and everything, and then you don't know what you're protecting is no good. So data classification, data identification, what are your crown jewels is key. So any processes you have gaps in identifying those needs to be fixed first. The second thing is improve your overall hygiene, be it identity or even for that matter, the assert inventory, crown jewel identification, the whole of the identity automations, right? Making sure that you are actually removing the right access and right identity based on the termination events and et cetera, right? So those have to be considered. Those are the basic foundation. So just to summarize, if I wanted to put that in this one, start with the data classification especially, right? And then hone on to the identity elements, which is make sure that your hygiene is pristine.
I agree.
Yep.
Well, just explore the identity aspect. We're at an identity conference, so expanding on that hygiene, right? I think one of the common misconceptions about zero trust, especially in the early days, I think it's a little bit better now, is you can buy a tool for zero trust, right? I can buy a tool, I'll implement it, the vendor promises it's zero trust, and I'm done, right? In the context of what you said with identity hygiene, right? We all know, SailPoint is a great tool, and a lot of large organizations are using it very well. But it's not just about the tool, right? And that's where, we help organizations. Kelly, you've been part of those things as well. It is a process element. It's about understanding your business, what are the different sources, making sure you have the right sources, the right integrations, but also the right process to cleanse it down to create that hygiene as well and maintain it in the long run. So anything you want to talk about in terms of that journey for clients as well?
It is really important, as you mentioned, right? even if you talk about IGA is going to be the foundational aspect, as I was mentioning earlier, right? It's not just identity, but it's also the static data which you are going to be managing. So you started with ACLs, right? Access control list. Now it becomes role. Now it becomes policy. The more and more you are abstracting yourself out of the loop of entitlement-driven access control, the better you're going to be, right? So then, which is where I think the policy-based access control is a new phenomenon which is coming up as well, is really great because you are not actually leveraging an entitlement or a role for making the decisions, but you are using a policy. Right, based on various other factors. That's where I think I was talking about the centralizing access engine. So that should be policy-based access engine that enables you to orchestrate the dynamically runtime decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
And does cloud play a role in all of this? A lot of organizations are becoming cloud first, migrating to the cloud, or being native to cloud in a lot of ways. Are there different principles, or is the same principles applied differently? How do you see that play out? I'll ask you both, but maybe Raj, you want to start?
Yeah, there. I can take that. Is that so from a cloud principle perspective, it's the principles are the same, the framework is the same, but where I think we can make it right is because when traditionally we started having these infrastructures and whatnot on-prem, we did not have this luxury of putting the security by design. Right. Now you have the framework, you have the principles, so from the get-go, whether it is cloud modernizations or cloud movement, moving your infrastructure to the cloud and whatnot, from the get-go, you have to start looking at these principles and implementing them in the rationale of zero trust, right? So that's where I think it's important. But there is nothing specific for cloud as such when it comes to zero trust, right? So it is considered as one of the elements of how do you protect it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the technology might be different, but the principle, the mindset of assume breach, all of that remains the same.
Yes.
It's how you implement it down might look different, right? Different modules or different products kind of helping you protect those assets.
That is correct, yes.
Right. So I think that was all the questions. Wanted to thank you again. It's been hopefully insightful for the audience as well, and thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Remember that way?
This way?
Yeah.
Please welcome back SailPoint's Chief Marketing Officer, Wendy Wu.
What a day it has been. I hope you feel as energized as I am after such an exciting day. So this is not the end yet. We still have a lot of exciting programs ahead of us. And raise your hand if you have brought your cowboy boots. What? Oh, some. I see some. You're going to put the boots to use very soon. So I hope to see you at our conference party at the Stubbs very soon for some authentic Austin experience. You don't want to miss the opportunity to network with your peers, the fun entertainment we're going to have there, the line dance, and the delicious barbecue, of course. And tomorrow we have more programs to anticipate. 9 o'clock, we'll be kicking off here sharp with our founder and CEO, Mark, and followed by panel discussions with our customers and our board members from Thoma Bravo. I know you don't want to miss those. Other highlights for tomorrow, we have our Women in Identity Luncheon, the Customer Awards Ceremony, and our closing keynote, Greg McEwen. All the fun stuff to anticipate. But until then, let's go have some fun. See you at the party.